can I be a blessing as a Christian to you, my dear Muslim friends and neighbors? This simple question became the driving, consuming question of my life after I met a little Muslim boy named Omar in a Starbucks on Creedmoor Road in Raleigh, North Carolina, 16 years ago. As I reflect now back on my encounter with Omar, it is hard to believe that just 16 years ago, I hated Muslims. I wanted nothing to do about it. I was a pastor, Christian evangelical, conservative pastor who was an Islamophobe, and not all evangelicals are this way. Not all of them would fall in that camp, but I did. I was so far to the right that, and I just hated Muslims. I would never use those words, but I did. And so one day, in the winter of 2005, I was in Starbucks one day and I was really struggling, and God let me have the privilege of encountering this beautiful 5-year-old little boy named Omar. And we were together for 30 minutes. And he tried to teach me Arabic. And in that 30 minutes, all the Islamophobia left my heart after years. It was, I call it my second conversion. All the bitterness, the anger, the fear, the doubt. God used a little Muslim boy to conquer my heart. And God, it was like I said, a conversion. God put this love in my heart for Muslims that has never left me to this day. And that's been 16 years later. So if you've never heard the Omar story, in this video, look up. There's a bubble. You can click it. Wait till after this video to watch it, but you can click it and watch it. And then I'm also working on a whole series on my peace journey about what happened after Omar. So this is part 10, but be sure to watch the video. I think you'll enjoy it. And so God took all that hatred out. It was amazing. And from that day forward, I walked out of that Starbucks and I looked up to the sky and I said, God, I'm in. I'm an evangelical Christian. I don't know how to do peacemaking. There weren't many evangelicals doing that in the United States. It was mostly Mennonites and Catholics and others. And so I said, I'm starting with a blank slate. I do not know how to do that. So I just looked up and said, I looked up in the sky and said, this day forward, I'll be a peacemaker in the way of my Master Jesus, and I'll build bridges between Muslims and Christians who are people of peace. From that day forward, I was on a mission from Allah. Like I said, like Blues Brothers said, they were on a mission from God. I said I was on a mission from God or Allah to bring Muslims and Christians together. So, you know, after you've had a radical conversion like this, I call it, of the heart, sometimes you need some time to process what's happened to you. And I needed that time. So I spent the next year going down to Islamic Association of Raleigh, the wonderful mosque. And I guess time of all the prayer services now, they probably, by the time everybody goes through, have about 4,000 or 5,000 people. And I went down there and started making friends with Muslims, and they were so kind with me. It didn't matter if they were conservative. It didn't matter what they were. They just took me in, and we became such good friends. And so I spent the first year, because I'd been such an Islamophobe, I said, I need to respect these people. I need to hear their stories and put myself in their shoes. So I did. So I spent a year asking questions. I knew very little about Islam. I'd just taken a 3-month class, but still very little about Islam. And so now the former Islamophobe had become a student of Islam as a Christian. So, and then what I began to do, I'd go every Friday. There'd be 3 prayer services. I'd stay for all 3 of them. I just dedicated the day for that. And then I would sit in the back, and I would bring other Christian leaders with me and others who were like, okay, I don't know about these Muslims. Come and see these Muslims, man. Check them out. You know, they're not the monsters we think we are. And this mosque had this beautiful cafeteria. So we would stay in the cafeteria after lunchtime and just ask the imams questions, other leaders, my friends. And we became friends. Lives were changed that day that day. And so so one day God gave me this idea for a question. And I had by this time formed an intentional peace community. And I was kind of training Christians on how to eat halal food. And, you know, just, hey, if you want to do what I'm doing, here's what we're going to do. We're going to just love Muslims and be peacemakers. So God gave me this idea one day about a question that would build the bridge. You know what I mean? That would build a bridge. And so that question was, how can I be a blessing to you and your people without a hook or agenda? Man, I've gone all over the United States asking Muslims. I've asked the Grand Mufti of Bosnia. I've asked the Grand Mufti of Kosovo. I have asked Muslim scholars. I have asked just the average, day-to-day Muslim that just works a normal job, is not a religious leader. And I would ask them, how can I be a blessing to you and your people without a hook? I would take church groups to go to the mosque near them and say, hey, can you tell these Christians how they can be a blessing to you and your people without a hook? And man, they were moved. The Grand Mufti of Kosovo was so moved he didn't know how to answer. I've never dreamed I'd have a Christian ask me this question. So what I discovered was many Muslims answered that question and said, well, we need to go beyond dialogue. We become friends. Some would say we need to have dialogue. One imam said our young people are getting in trouble. They're getting recruited for bad causes by extremists who don't even attend the mosque. Most extremists don't attend the mosque anyway. And some of them are getting in gangs and fights. Can you help us? And even if I didn't have the resources, I said yes. And I would go find it and help them. So I when they asked me how I could bless them, I did it. So in the early days, as I was at the mosque, before I started this international ministry, not ministry, what do you call it? Peace, international peace. I'm having trouble with words. International peace mission. Thank you. That's what I was going to think about. I was making friends in Raleigh with a Muslim civil rights group called MAPAC, Muslim American Public Affairs Council. Great group of people. And we were to eat together, and one of them, we would go every week to the Waffle House, and he'd have pecan waffles and I'd have chocolate chip, and we'd look at our holy books together and ask questions as friends, and look at the prophets and find out what we have in common about Jesus, and also the prophets, what's the common primal message. We did a lot of stuff, and we were eating at each other's home, we were going out with each other, and this is just a small section. I did this with a lot of people. And so one day I asked this group, these group of leaders who were fighting for civil rights for the Muslim community. I said, guys, how can I be a blessing? I'm a Christian, but how can I be a blessing to you and your organization? I didn't know what they were going to ask, but they said, would you as a Christian be willing to write for our paper called Iqra? And all Muslims know Iqra means recite. That's what was said to Prophet Muhammad, if I'm correct, Iqra, right? Recite in the name of the Lord. And so would I be willing to write for the Muslim newspaper, Iqra? And they went on to say, Jeff, we know you love Muslims and you genuinely want to try to help bring our community together, bring Muslims and Christians together in friendship and in service. So would you be willing to be a writer? I think it would help us build those bridges. And I said, sure, I'll be glad to write for the newspaper. I was pumped about it. They said, you can write on whatever you want. And I thought, hey, they asked me how I could be a blessing, and they told me, so I'm going to do it. Well, my willingness to write for a Muslim newspaper, political newspaper, civil rights newspaper, of course, that was in 2005. This is just right after 9/11. So some of my Christian friends, they pushed back and said, why are you doing this? Why are you writing for a Muslim newspaper? I said, well, I think Jesus would, if he were asked to do something like this, he would do it. It doesn't matter what the religion is. And I said, I told them, I believe God wants Christians, genuine Christians that follow the path and love God and love neighbor and want to follow the sunnah of Jesus. I believe God wants Christians to bless their Muslim neighbors, and this is one way I can serve them. This is one thing I can do, so I'm going to bless them. So, God has this dream, and that dream is for peace on earth and goodwill towards all people. That's a facet of God's dream. It's a big facet. Now, the way we can participate in God's dream is to go on mission. What does that mean? The mission of God begins with friendship. Until Muslims and Christians are friends, we're not working towards God's dream of peace on earth and goodwill towards all people. And God wants us in our friendship to find common ground, to discuss our differences, and to help each other. And so the mission of God, if you want to be in part of God's dream for peace on earth, you got to participate in the mission of God, which is friendship. And that's one of the hardest ones for people to do. And when we participate in that mission of friendship, we inevitably need to put some feet to our intention. And so we must ask this question. Here it is. So simple. I'm a country boy from the South. I keep things simple. How can we be a blessing to each other? I'll ask my Muslim friends, how can we be a blessing to you? And I'll tell other stories. Some said, hey, we need more volunteers to lay prayer lines at the fairground for Eid. We don't have enough Muslims. We'd do it. Whatever it was, we would do it. So we need to ask that question of our friends, how can we be a blessing to each one another? And so asking that question is one of the highest ways that Muslims can express God's love to each other. It's one of the highest ways. When we do it with pure motives, my friends, listen, we are submitted to God. And I'm not going to argue today about what it means to be submitted to God, but I'm telling you this: loving God, loving neighbor, treating other people the way you want to be treated, being a peacemaker is submission to God. You know, if you claim to be a Muslim or a Christian and you're not doing this, you're not submitted to God. I don't care what you say. I challenge Muslims and Christians to look at their own faith communities and say, I'm not going to go by what they say, what my pastor says, or just my imam says. I'm going to go watch them and see what they do. And if they're advocating violence and exclusion and pushing the other out, they're not on this path that I'm talking about here. And this path right here is a path of blessing. And Allah wants to bless the nations. So I did. I did what they asked me to do. So I wrote book reviews. That was so much fun. Lots of book reviews. I did interviews. I interviewed Palestinian activists that were trying to help their people, Israeli activists who were trying to help Palestinians. I did an article on a group of Christians that were murdered by an extremist, they call themselves Muslims, but they're not real Muslims, in Turkey, just brutally killed them. And I said, guys, we got to make a response to this. So I wrote an article, and I'll send it to you. If you write me, I'll send you some of the articles that I wrote. And I wrote an article called Listen to the Prophets. And I looked at what Jesus said, the Prophet Muhammad said, peace be to him. And I said, there's no grounds based on what I'm learning here for Muslims and Christians to persecute and kill each other. It's sin. It's wrong. It brings shame on the name of God. It really does. And so I wrote on justice and peace and social activism, and just kept building my friendships with the Muslim leaders there. And then if they said, Jeff, we're going to go meet as our Muslim political organization is going to go meet with this congressman or that senator. Sometimes it was to talk about helping Palestinians. Sometimes it was talk about concerns in the Muslim community where they needed help, and they said, you're a Christian, you're a part of our team. I'd love to go. And sometimes I'd take some other Christians just to stand with them. So this is how I was being a blessing to this Muslim organization. Well, here's the big shocker. I told you there's a shocker to this thing. You know, once you start hanging out and becoming friends as Muslims and Christians, you start seeing each other as believers in God. Not just believers, but as submitted to God. And you start saying, man, that guy is so godly. I can't imagine him in hell, or that person loves Allah so much. I can't imagine, paradise without them. Things start changing. And I find this as I read the Quran and the scriptures. And so, but here's the big shocker. The big shocker is that some people, I'd been doing this for 2 or 3 years, some Muslim people, and they weren't being mean about it. They were just asking a legitimate question. They said, look, in order to be a part of this Muslim civil rights political organization, technically you have to be a Muslim. And they said, Jeff Burns is not a Muslim. How do you reconcile that? Well, they weren't even thinking that way anymore. Jeff, so a lot of people begin to just see me as a Muslim. He's a Christian, but, he's a Muslim in his heart, which, and all that stuff. So they had no intentions of throwing me out or getting rid of me, and because I'd been a blessing to them. And one of the leaders said, Jeff, you do more for Muslims than Muslims, because he was upset that anybody would challenge me being in it. He says, and others said, you tend the mosque more than a lot of Muslims. And it says, you are one of us. You're not a member of our religion of Islam, but you are submitted to God. We cannot say that you are not submitted to God. And so they said, we figured out a way to keep you. I said, keep me? How are you going to do that? So technically you can't be a member of this organization, but you are a member in our hearts. And they said, so we're going to call you our Muslim consultant. You're a Christian. You're going to be our Muslim consultant. And that way you can stay involved in everything. You're a Christian. You're going to give us advice, guidance, which I was already doing. So I became the Muslim consultant in order to stay in this organization. And I just loved these people so much. It was just one of the most glorious times of my life. So as you can see, love breaks down barriers. You start looking at each other differently. We're not judgment and all these things leave us. So if you want to submit to Allah and you want to follow this path I'm talking about, and I got some more stories coming. I know I've been out inconsistent because of illness, but I'm back. I'm really back this time. If you want to submit to Allah and you want to follow the path that I'm talking about here, first of all, you must embrace the message of the path. The message of the path is, it comes from the Sunnah of Jesus in Matthew 5, 6, and 7. It's the greatest commandment. The Prophet Muhammad said you can't enter paradise without embracing this message. And that message is so simple. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Treat other people the way they want to be treated, no matter how different they are from you. And if you do find an enemy along the way, do everything within your power to make them your friends. You know, Martin Luther King said the only way to permanently get rid of an enemy was to make them your friend. And I was told by my good friend Safi Kaskas that Martin Luther King got that idea from Islam. So if Muslims aren't making friends with people they perceive as enemies or the other, then they're always going to be your enemy. But the way you get rid of that is make them your friend. So I put into the description below some scriptures. You can read them later. But here's the bottom line. If we're going to compete with one another, my Muslim friends, my Christian friends, we can't compete with violence. Violence does not work. Look, after the 1600 years of war, it doesn't work. Does not work. Either side, it doesn't work. I don't care whether we Christians and have the same problems as the Muslims. Unfortunately, I could go in a lot of detail about that, but the bottom line, violence doesn't work. Exclusion doesn't work. Pushing out the other does not work. It doesn't work. So the Quran says, and I got the verses for you, or the ayahs for you, so you can see the truth. Prophet Muhammad, peace be to him, got this from revelation from God. And he said, to every community there's a direction to turn to. So compete to do good deeds wherever you may be. Right? And he says, in Injil it says, let us consider how to provoke one another to love and good deeds. Jesus said in the Injil, you shall know them by their fruits. If you see a man that claims to be a devoted Muslim or a devoted Christian, you'll know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes from thorns or figs from thistles? Even so, every good tree will bring forth good fruit. So, my friends, I love you. Like I said, like, comment, share this if you would. Subscribe, ring the bell for notifications. And I give you a challenge today as I go, and I'll see you next week. If you feel called to begin to ask your Muslim, Christian, or Hindu friend, whoever it is, how you can be a blessing to them. Enter into friendship and say, now, how can I be a blessing to you as a Christian or a Muslim? How can I do that? I'm giving you that challenge to ask that question. And those of you who do this, let me know and tell me how it goes. Okay, I want to hear about your experience, because I've had people write me over the years. I've had one Muslim village somewhere that said, we got this Christian, he's a jerk, and he was not a nice guy, and said we voted to kill him. But after listening to your stories, we realized this is not the way. I had one imam write me and say, because of what you've shared, I'm going to go make friends with my Jewish neighbor. So that's what I'm about. It's for, and as Forrest Gump said, that's all I got to say about that. So God willing, I'll see you next week.